There's no denying that walking a lot is tremendous for fat loss, but how can we time our walking even better to get more fat loss using science? So there's some newer data that helps us understand what we get out of fat loss when it comes down to walking, like what is actually happening. We have what is called beta oxidation, where at lower intensities like walking, 50, 60% of our VO2 max, our bodies preferentially use fats unless there's something standing in the way, which we'll talk about in a second. So let's go ahead and break it down. After today's video, I put a link down below for Sundays. So if you have dogs, speaking of walking, it just makes sense. You're out walking the dog, you probably take care of your dogs. I don't usually talk about dog food on this channel, but since I know a lot of my audience has them, and I have 3, I care about what I feed them. So Sundays is the world's only human grade dog food. So it's veterinarian formulated. When I say human grade, that means that we as humans could literally eat it. It's the highest quality. So what they're using as far as like sweet potato, as far as the meat ingredients, it's all human grade. I mean, it wouldn't taste great for us to eat, but if we're literally wanting to feed our dogs the highest quality food, we want something like that. So it's air dried, it's super delicious. Like my dogs just devoured, especially our new puppy. So anyhow, that link is down below. That saves you some moolah if you want to try them out. So I highly recommend you use that link, save some cash, and try Sundays for your pups. So I want to talk about one study first. It's really no surprise. It was published in the journal Exercise, Nutrition, and Biochemistry. Had subjects that were obese go for a walk. It had them do 50 to 60% of their VO2 max 3 days per week for 12 weeks. And what they found is that just doing that dramatically decreased their BMI, dramatically decreased their subcutaneous fat, but also reduced their visceral fat. Now, in addition to this, it also decreased their interleukin-6 and C-reactive protein, so it decreased inflammation. Okay, I'm preaching to the choir. We know that walking is good and it's good for fat loss, but how can we get the most out of it? Okay, well, there was another study that looked at walking timing in terms of like when people ate and when they would walk. So this study was published in the International Journal of Obesity, and it had subjects either eat breakfast or not eat breakfast, and then go for a 45-minute walk on a treadmill. What they found is that when breakfast was consumed, the level of carb oxidation was very high prior to exercise, during exercise, and after the walk. Okay, so that means their body was utilizing carbs. Could they still be losing weight? Absolutely. Okay, the thermodynamic equation doesn't change. People are still burning fuel, but oxidizing carbs means you're oxidizing carbs and not oxidizing fats. So what they did find is that the group that didn't have breakfast had higher levels of circulating non-esterified fatty acids prior to exercise, meaning they were already utilizing fats before they even started exercising because they didn't eat. And then they went for a walk, and they were still having high levels of non-esterified fatty acids. And then after the walk and 30 minutes after the walk, they still had high circulating lipids. What this is demonstrating is that walking in a fasted state, not even extremely fasted, is going to get you more overall fat loss benefit. What we've seen with this data is that more lipolysis essentially occurred. We liberated more fats and ultimately turned over more fats. So how do you take this? We know that walking is really good. It's low impact. We know that it spares muscle because it's not high energy and it's very low demand. But how do we time it properly? Because not everyone can just get up in the morning and go for a fasted walk. That would be the ideal situation. But what you want to do is you want to time your walks when you are the most hungry or in between your meals. So let's say you ate breakfast. If you go for a walk right after breakfast, that is tremendous for what is called glycemic control. That means it's going to suck up the glucose from that breakfast, and it's going to prevent the glucose from spiking. Don't get me wrong, that is phenomenal. But if your goal is fat loss and you want to oxidize more fat, you might want to wait a couple hours, assuming you didn't have a tremendous amount of carbohydrates and are spiking your glucose super high. If you wait a couple of hours and you get yourself to the bottom trough of like in between meals, that's going to be the ideal time for fat loss because the carbs have already been burned. So think of it like this. You fill up a sink with a bunch of food, okay? And you turn on the garbage disposal. Your body that garbage disposal has to burn through all that stuff in the sink before it can start burning the water and have the water flow through the drain. It's the same kind of thing with fat loss in a way. You just ate a meal, going for a walk is definitely going to turn on the garbage disposal. It's going to burn through that food and it's going to lower your glucose and it's going to do great things. Don't get me wrong. But you're going to have to burn through all of that before you ever get to a point where you're burning fat. If you wait for that food to break down a little bit and then go for a walk when the food is already digested by the garbage disposal, you're going to liberate more of those fats, you're going to have lower levels of insulin, and you're going to be able to therefore oxidize more fat because insulin isn't preventing lipolysis. So we know that walking is tremendous, but timing it in between your meals strategically at the furthest distance from your meal that you possibly can be, that's going to be the best possible situation for fat loss. I'll see you tomorrow.